Well, the elections are over and the midterms are in the books, but there are many changes that happen across the country, and no more impactful than here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and thank you for joining us for our Election Recap 2022. We'll be back in just a moment with our special guest, Gary McCollum. Welcome back. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you once again for joining us on this beautiful Sunday here as we broadcast in the great Commonwealth of Virginia, the great region of Hampton Roads, the great city of Norfolk, on the campus of the great university, HBCU, the Norfolk State University, here at WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. As always, we have with us our producer who keeps us right and tight, DJ Scandalous, which you can hear every day from 2 to 6 p.m. here on WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Also on Saturday, and yes, the hardest working man in radio on Sunday because he's live in studio with me every Sunday here. Look, it's been a phenomenal week here in Hampton Roads with so many things happening. We had the Mighty Dream Forum. We had the Black Brand Diamond Weekend. And, you know, we're just going to get into all of that later on. But for this show, we also had our elections. Now, if you're like me, you saw commercial after commercial after commercial, advertisement after advertisement, and you saw so many candidates, you know, going out, vying for your vote. Well, that election is in the books. The midterm election, which was supposed to be a red tsunami, you know, where the conservatives were supposed to win, just clear out seats in the House, win the Senate, and also on the state level across the board. But what ended up happening, we saw something a little different. It looks like a little red ripple. But we're going to talk about the impact of that right now, and I'm so glad to have with us Mr. Gary McCollum, who's president and co-founder of DUE, The Right Things, and also the former rector here at Norfolk State University. Mr. McCollum, thank you so much for joining us here on Stay in the Water.
Thank you for inviting me, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the return invitation. I was looking forward to being with you this morning because, wow, Tuesday was something else.
Look. It definitely was, and listen, all the talk shows now are talking about it and the implications of it, the analysis of who won what and why this didn't happen and all of that, and of course, as we know, Monday morning quarterbacking is always, always best when you talk about what should have happened and could have happened. But we want to take a look at exactly, what it is. So, from your overall impression, what's your impression of the national, the state, and the local elections?
I think it boiled down to the fact that young people, they reacted to the Dobbs, the attack on Roe, and they came out and they voted. And, and I think the Democrats also did a great job of convincing people that democracy was on the ballot. And so you combine that with the fact that a number of the candidates nationally that the Republicans put forward, yes, they won a primary, but when it came to the real game, the general, people said, we don't want crazy. We want rational people. And I think that's what you saw. This red was supposed to be a red wave, as you mentioned, turned into a ripple. And right now, the Democrats are going to maintain, the Senate, and there still is a possibility that they could maintain the House. And that should not have happened. That was a historic effort by the Democrats. But I think it was Dobbs. I think it was people voting against crazy, and young people being energized.
Absolutely. Let's talk about voting against crazy. Let's look at the national election first. I think you bring out a very good point of what type of voters were energized, what they were energized by, and actually who got out. So the impact of the red ripple as opposed to the red wave. So, there's this discussion and argument, and we actually saw a comment by our lieutenant governor, one of our conservative Republican representatives, that said it's time for the Republican Party to move away from Trump because it looks as if his impact on the ballot actually was a negative this time for the Republicans taking seats. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was a drag. I don't agree with our lieutenant governor on too many items, but that one, I do agree that he hurt their efforts by endorsing those candidates in the primary, and they're not being ready for prime time during the general. I think it hurt. I think former Lieutenant Governor Bowling made the same comment that he was. I think he used the term albatross. But yeah, I think people are starting to see that. The tough piece of this is that I think the Republicans, I don't know if they can walk away from this guy now. It's really tough because you get the primary, and if you don't act that way, you probably won't win the primary just because of the way things have been, the lines have been drawn in these districts nationally. So they're in a tough situation. They really are. And I want to go back and double click on this point about young people. Mm-hmm. Young people are moving to the left. Dobbs clearly was, the Roe decision helped push them further to the left. But I think that's going to be a problem for the Republicans going forward if you continue to see young people, sway to the left.
It's interesting you mentioned where the young people are going, because when you talk about the messaging and moving away from Trump, I've seen this analysis where now we have Kevin McCarthy, who is planning a transition team if the Republicans do take the House, because right now they're leading 211 seats to 204 to the Democrats, with still many out there to decide it. So if they do win the majority of the House, it's going to be by a very slim majority. And we'll talk about one seat they flipped here in Virginia Beach. But the question is, what's going to be their agenda for the next 2 years, their talking points? And one thing they saw was, he's getting advice from none other than Newt Gingrich. Now, Gary, you and I are old enough to remember the Newt Gingrich era, where he talked about the moral decay of America.
Yeah. It's leading backwards instead of leading forward, and I think that's the dilemma that the Republicans have right now. I mean, you look at the fact that our first Gen Z Congress elect is from Florida.
Yes.
A young, I think he's 25
years old.
Maxwell
right?
Frost, I believe. Yeah. That's the future. And anyone trying to put that genie back in the bottle, it's not going to work. And I think even the Democrats are figuring out that they're going to have to engage with younger voters. And it's going to be interesting to see if the Democrats do hold the House, whether Nancy Pelosi actually stays in leadership. That's not a that's not a sure thing. But I think that's what happened. I was so energized. And one other point I'll make,
yes.
I think the fact that it was easier to vote, early voting,
yes.
You could register and vote on the same day. I mean, those things also, I was looking at some numbers yesterday that showed college kids how they benefited from that those new voting rules, making it easier to vote.
You talk about, I've done several shows on access to the ballot box, right? And I've talked about how the Commonwealth under the Northam administration, the legislature, got it right, where they increase access to the ballot box as opposed to decreasing access to the ballot box or making it harder. And I'll be honest with you, I love no excuse early voting or absentee voting, because I can go in and cast my vote at my leisure and take my time and vote for whoever I want to vote for. And to me, if you increase access to the ballot box, I think democracy wins.
Absolutely. It won on Tuesday. It did. And I'll tell you, you touched on CD2, the Kiggins-Luria race. And I can tell you, I mean, when you look at the numbers, which I'm sure you have, I hope, the Republican leaders, the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, I hope they're not thinking that Virginia is a is a red state or even a purple state. Virginia is a blue state, and the only reason I believe that Luria lost was because of redistricting. The way those lines were drawn, it really was I wouldn't say it was an impossibility, but she came within 500 votes of winning Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
It was only in Southampton County and Isle of Wight. That's where she lost. That was the new part of the district. And the fact that the Republicans didn't win against Spanberger, they didn't win against Wexton. Mm-hmm. I hope nobody's running off thinking that this is a purple state. I would strongly disagree.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, look, let's go ahead and shift toward that race because I really wanted to dig into Virginia Beach as a whole. And you talked about the numbers. And let's start here first with the 2nd Congressional District. And looking at the numbers, now Congresswoman-elect Jen Kiggins, who was currently a state senator, and we'll talk about that in a moment and what happens with that special election. But she won 52% of the votes, and Elaine Luria is 48%. But when you look at the total vote gathering itself, you're looking at a little bit over 12,000 votes, right? That's not a lot of votes when you look at the big picture of what happened, 12 to 14,000. Once the final numbers come in, these are the latest results in November 10th with 95% of the votes in. But when looking at that, we talked about redistricting. And for one, I was one who was totally against the new redistricting plan as it relates to how we choose to draw our lines. Case in point, just for our listeners, there was a vote in which the voters were able to decide whether we wanted a citizen board to redraw the lines of our districts that we elect our individuals in from a federal Congress also to state, as opposed to the legislature that has done it historically for years. I think the problem with that is that now you have a system where only the courts is your only backdrop or backup to where you can say, no, this is unfair or not. So to your point, that new district was really the deciding factor in eliminating a lot of those Democratic-leaning votes from Norfolk and those areas in which Elaine Luria and the Democrats benefited to now switching to that new district, Isle of Wight and across, under Norfolk, where a lot of conservative voters vote.
Yeah, completely agree. And I share your view of that process that we used. It was just not the right process. And frankly, that process and that decision was why I believe Luria did not win that election. She ran a great campaign,
Absolutely.
But the numbers are the numbers. The map is the map. But that being said, now we have Congresswoman-elect Higgins, which is, as you mentioned, is going to open up a Senate seat. And as you know, that special election will be with the old map, not the new map.
Right.
It'll be the old map.
The 2010 to 2020 map, not the 2021.
And so that special election, who I don't want to steal Aaron Ross's thunder, but I am sure he's going to be announcing that he's running for that seat. But that seat will only be for one session, and obviously, as you know, next November, the Senate will be on the ballot. State Senate will be on the ballot.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that point because, now if he's going to run, which we all know that he will, for that special election seat, now you have to shift because the district's going to change because now we're going to look at the new lines, that are drawn from there. And, let's take a look at the state impact, right? So when we take a look at the state impact of this election, that's going to shift, all right, the now special election. And so that's going to shift the Senate slightly as well here on the state level. But not only that, but when we talk about Virginia Beach, and Virginia Beach very well, and I really want to get your perspective on this. In Virginia Beach now, who we have our governor, Glenn Youngkin from Virginia Beach, our Attorney General, Jason Miyares, our Lieutenant Governor, Wisdom Sears, and now our Congresswoman for the 2nd Congressional District representing Virginia Beach from Virginia Beach.
Yes, that is a fact. They are all from Virginia Beach, which I guess in some way even though politically I don't agree with everything that they are proposing, they are familiar with Virginia Beach. The thing I like about what happened on Tuesday, however, is that there was a shift in the power structure on city council. And we can get into that if you want, but we were very happy that this decision that gave us district voting within the city, which is what we were pushing for, it made an impact. And now we have a council. The new council, in my opinion, will be much more able to, as I would like to say, do the right thing versus the current council.
Absolutely. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But it's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you for joining us for our annual election recap as we talk about and dissect and analyze the midterm elections here in 2022 on the national, on the state, and the local level. Joining us with us, we have Mr. Gary McCollum, who is the president and also the founder of his organization, DUE, The Right Things, and also former rector here at the Norfolk State University. Now, Gary, you mentioned the ward voting, and I want our listeners to understand how that came about. We have one of our Norfolk State University alums, Latasha Holloway, a citizen that filed a lawsuit in pro se that said that the way that Virginia Beach were electing our local representatives by citywide or at large, was definitely unconstitutional. Same lawsuit filed here in the city of Norfolk back in the 80s, and we have what's called ward voting here. And then, of course, the lawsuit, of course, won, and then the state codified it and created what we call now different wards. So now you have different districts that you can vote if you live in Virginia Beach for representatives on the city council level. So the power of the people was in full display when we saw the election of the new Virginia Beach City Council.
Yes, absolutely. Because as you know, and clearly Latasha Holloway gets a lot of credit for putting this issue out there, taking a stand, bringing the lawsuit. And as you know, even though the lawsuit was eventually overturned, as you mentioned, the legislature took action, and so we have a district-only voting system. Because the old system, as we know it, it made no sense for a council person having to run citywide. Yeah. You ran in your district, but the votes were counted citywide, and it just made it impossible for anyone to mount a campaign, to raise the funds, to door knock, to do all the things that you need to do, unless you were supported by the establishment. And so those were the candidates who won.
Absolutely.
So with this new system, obviously, you really had to worry about your district, and you could focus on local issues within that district. And so it made it much more competitive. We were very happy with the results. That the way we look at it now is that we pretty much have a balanced city council now, and again, a council that we believe is going to step away from some of the backroom deals, some of the cronyism that we've been seeing in the city, and really making it a city that's a great city for everyone and not just those with moneyed interests.
You know, when you talk about the city itself, the city council, and its impact upon making it a great city, you know, what are your in taking a look at the shakeup on the council, right? Because we have several new members who are on the council. You know, those individuals, of course, you have some long time incumbents that actually won as well. But when you take a look at now the new makeup, do you anticipate some bumpiness along the way, or do you think that this council is going to immediately start gelling and working with the governor, the city manager, the economic development director, and the business community to say, hey, you know, let's now start moving forward, you know, and making this a city for all?
I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that will be the case. I mean, I know everyone on council, the people who've been there, you know, Mayor Dyer, Rosemary Wilson, Rocky Holcomb, Barbara Henley, Michael Berlucci. I mean, they're all, you know, good people, reasonable people. But I think with these new council people, you know, bringing Amelia Ross Hammond back, Josh Chauvin, Worth Remick out in the 6th District, which I think will be a phenomenal person filling that role at the beach. And obviously Sabrina Wooten being there, and a newcomer, Chris Taylor. I think we have an opportunity to really build some coalitions and do things, frankly, that that we just haven't done before. Looking at small business grants, creation of minority business opportunity zone, debundling some of the entertainment and service contracts, that have been going, these have been sole source, no big contracts. So there's an opportunity to increase the diversity on boards and commissions. I mean, those are the opportunities now I see, and there are a number of other things that I think this new council will be much more positioned in favor of doing those kinds of things than the previous council. So I'm hopeful.
Same here. And also Jennifer Rouse, Aaron's wife, that also won.
Yes, and Jennifer Rouse. I neglected to mention Jennifer. Yeah, in the 10th. That was a great victory for Jennifer.
Yeah, she edged out.
But yeah, there's a whole lot of things that can be done. I mean, one item I forgot to mention was, police oversight. Really getting that Citizens Review Board up and running and doing it the right way, so that you can build trust within certain marginalized communities within the city. So I think I'm hopeful.
Absolutely. And I know that's something that you've been, with your organization, Do the Right Things, squarely involved in, the business and the Citizen Review Board and accountability across the board. So in moving forward, I want to get your take on it, on this. Pharrell Williams, Virginia Beach native son, made the announcement that Something in the Water was coming back, to Virginia Beach. Do you think that was, of course, the mayor was there, Aaron, the economic development director, there. And do you think that's something that is a step in the right direction when we talk about, making it a city for everyone?
I do. And we were very pleased with that announcement. We had some indication that was going to happen. We didn't know exactly the timing of it. But I think if you look back at this whole scenario of having the festival here and then it leaving, I think that's a case in point as to why we needed new leadership on the council. Because frankly, it never should have gotten to that point. Wow. It never should have been a case of bringing it back. It should never have left. And that's, frankly, we can't ignore that. We have to say that, frankly, the old council didn't do the right thing.
Right.
So the fact that it is now coming back, it's wonderful. And the thing, I'll tell you, listeners, the contract hasn't been signed. It will be signed, obviously, but the city is looking for input. There's going to be a meeting on the 15th where the city is going to get input from citizens on what they would like to see in the contract. And two things that we're going to be pushing for that we think is an opportunity this time is we'd like to clearly see more local businesses involved in the festival.
Yes.
In other words, instead of bringing in, national, restaurants and chains, let's utilize our local restaurants. Let's make sure that the entire city can win. Clearly hotels are going to win at the beach, but we have great restaurants. We have great makeup artists. We have great videographers. We have tons of talented people, businesses here. And so how do we make sure that they win with the festival also? And then the second thing I would say, we have great talent. We have great music, creative talent, and just understanding that there is a creative economy that we can leverage with this festival. And I love Pharrell. He's so creative. Please bring in all kinds of great acts. But also, let's get some local talent on that stage, because we have a ton of it right here. Matter of fact, a lot of it comes out of Norfolk State University, as you probably know.
Absolutely.
So those are two items that we're pushing for. So.
It's funny you mention that, because I had Don Carey, with the Don Carey Reach Foundation that he and his wife do, and making a tremendous impact with kids and STEM education and also sports. And he talked about, he started his foundation in Detroit and so forth. And I said, why did you come home? He said, man, what people don't realize is that Hampton Roads, we got everything that we need right here, from family, entertainment, food, everything that you just named, Gary. Don was like, listen, I don't know if people here realize it, but this place has simply everything. And this was someone who's of course traveled all over the country, played, had a great career, but said, hey, I'm making Hampton Roads my home. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And my friend Bruce Smith says the same thing. He could have lived anywhere, but he wanted to come back home for that very reason. At the same time, though, let's make sure that, it's a level playing field, and let's not just, have deals where your friends get them all the time,
Right.
and as opposed to, making it a level playing field for everybody. But yeah, this is a great place. It absolutely is a great place. And I'm just hopeful based on what happened on the 8th. I really am excited about what happened.
Yeah.
Democracy won, without a doubt.
That was really my sentiment as well. That when we talked about access to the ballot box, when we talked about the posters being wrong again in the media, it showed that the people at the final say is the people, the people's voice, and the people's voice is heard when we increase access to the ballot box, when our candidates are able to give their message and people are able to make their decision. Is one man, one vote something that we tout here in our country, something that people travel from their birthplace around the world and come to America and say, I want to be a part of this American experiment, and the ability to vote and voice your opinion without fear, of being attacked or killed or live in a police state is something that we got to fight for. Democracy is something we got to fight for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point I would make is that, yes, we made a decision on Tuesday, the 8th, but it doesn't stop there. We have to now stay engaged. Let's show up at our city council. Let's show up at our school board. Let's go to these planning commissions. Let's go. We have to, write the letter. We have to, you have to stay engaged. I think I said when I was on with you the last time that the most important office any of us hold is the office of citizen. And there's a requirement. There's a thing you have to do. The job description of being a citizen means that you have to be engaged in this stuff. These politicians, they work for us, not the other way around. And so I would encourage anybody listening it's not over. It's just now beginning. Let's stay engaged with all of these folks, regardless of party affiliation. Make sure that they are aware of the things that we want to see in our community.
Absolutely. And Gary, I'm glad you mentioned that staying engaged. That is the next step. Continue to, as you mentioned, now we have the new council. And this council, a lot of these new members ran on the basis of, hey, I'm here for you. Reach out to me, and I'm going to fight for you. So we're going to hold them to it and hold them accountable, and hold all of our elected officials accountable. Because one thing, especially in this time that we're in, Gary, I respect anybody that runs for public office because all's fair in war, love, and politics, right? So once again, Gary McCollum, president and co-founder of Do the Right Things. I want to thank you so much again for your insight, your perspective. It's truly valuable, and I thank you again for sharing it with us here to our audience on Stay the Water.
Well, thank you, and I'm just honored to be on the show, and keep doing what you're doing because it is helping our community, without a doubt.
I appreciate it. Well, once again, we got so much to talk about, but only limited time to do it. But we want to thank you for joining us out there that listening to Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Go out, be great. God bless. We'll see you next week.